Hey everybody, today we are going to use these water-soluble crayons, the Caran Neocolor 2 crayons. Lately I've been seeing them everywhere. I've had these for so many years, and when I first did a video about them, it seemed like nobody really cared about them, but lately I see them popping up on my YouTube feed. I don't know why, maybe it's just because I'm interested in them, but I was hoping that you'd be interested in them as well. So today I have several ideas for you how you can use them and kind of tips and tricks on how to use them as well. You can see here that I did somewhat of a simple sketch. I mean, this is a landscape and I'm trying to include as many details as I can, but with these crayons, especially in this size, I would keep it rather simple. And I used these the way that they were originally intended, to be blended with water. I used them blended with water, but I also used them for their texture. So I did both things. And this is similar to how I personally use watercolor pencils as well. And I at first just colored everything in basically so we don't have any white of the paper showing through anymore. And also I'm using a rather textured paper here. This is the Etchr quote-unquote perfect sketchbook. I personally find that the texture is a little bit too rough for my taste, but I only had a few pages left in this and I just wanted to fill it, so this is what I was using here. I would recommend with these to, if you want to use them like I did here, use a watercolor paper, but maybe with a little bit less texture and not so rough, because then you can add in details a little bit more easily. But I wouldn't use a super smooth paper either, because you want them to grip onto the paper as well. And also you can see that even after I blended them with water, you can still see some of the texture of the crayons. It's not completely blended. If I wanted that to happen, I could have gone over this again and again until every little grain was blended in. But I didn't want that. I did want the texture. And personally, I think if you're using these, then you might as well leave a little bit of that texture on there, because that's kind of the point of them. And also, if you use a smoother paper, it's probably going to be a little bit less texture, just so you know. And I used my set to the best of its ability. Here I made sure that it is already dry, the background, before adding another layer. I only have this basic set. I think it's one of the smallest sets that they offer, but I didn't really want to get a huge set. Let's see how this video goes. If it's extremely popular, I might treat myself to a bigger set or different colors of those. I've seen that they have really pretty pastel colors or more desaturated colors. I think that the ones I have in the set are a little bit too vibrant for my taste. So I'm trying to mix them so they're not as intense anymore. For the longest time with this piece, I found that the sky was a little bit too blue. It looked a little bit too cartoony for me, so I'm gonna fix that later on. And you can see that I also really used gradients with a lot of colors. I love doing bushes and the grass and all of these areas with different colors. I use yellow and orange towards the top where the light is supposed to hit. And then I move more into the green towards the bottom. And then I even move into blue and or purple tones depending on my piece. Here you can see I started with my lighter green, then did the darker green, then I even did this turquoisey blue tone, and I even added some purple at the bottom of all of this grass area. And then I was careful as I was blending it not to go the wrong way around. I made sure that I went horizontally as opposed to vertically, so that I wouldn't blend these together too much. You still want it to be visible where the more orange part was and where the more purple part was, and not mix them into a muddy mess essentially. And so I went with that line horizontally, if that makes sense. And then I also colored in the rest of the sections because the white was starting to bother me, and I just added more and more color and grain, building it up. The white is a little bit opaque, so you can kind of build on top and go into a lighter way later on as well. But for the most part, I would say start with lighter colors and build them up and make them darker gradually, like we would with watercolors, for example. So I just slowly build up my colors more and more here. By the way, if you're interested in how to fill a sketchbook from start to finish and actually get it done, then I recommend checking out my course about this. It really goes into depth about why you might have never finished a sketchbook before and how you can do it this time, and also how you can have fun with that, enjoy the process, and get the most out of it, essentially. I will leave a link to the course in the description box below, so make sure to check it out. So you can see that I'm now also blending the tree trunks and all of those areas in with my brush and just some water, and then building up the colors and the textures over and over and over. This is really something where you should take your time and also have fun with it, because this is a very intuitive way to create art, if you ask me, because it's not that structured. You're always gonna have a little bit of texture, and it's always gonna look a little bit playful. And so I would really embrace that and play around with this type of medium, because if your goal is to get rid of all the texture, then use watercolors or gouache. Don't use these. If you want to play around with something, then these are really fun. I find that when I am going through some art block and having a hard time with my usual materials, mostly gouache and watercolors, then using something like this can really help to break the art block, because you can't have that many details with these. I mean, you could if you really wanted to, but mostly it's not supposed to do that. It's not supposed to be used for an extremely detailed art piece that is super structured and has super flat layers. That's not what these are supposed to do. So I find that they're really fun to use when you feel like you're putting too much pressure on yourself and you have a little bit of art block. Here, checking again if everything is dry so I can move on to the next layer. Here I am actually using the white to add a little bit of a contrast as well. And I find that adding the white really helps and looks really fun. And also I was using both sides of the crayon so that I could get a little bit thinner lines. Like I said, this is not exact medium, but you could, if you wanted to, sharpen your crayons a little bit so you could get a thinner detailed line out of them. I was using the back sides and just using them really sideways, like here with the purple, so that I could get a little bit of a thinner line, because I didn't really want to sharpen them. But at some point, if I continue to use them, I might do that just to get a little bit more detail in. Here I was finally using them sort of like watercolors. You can rub them onto a surface that is really smooth. I was just using the box that they came in, and I was using purple, a little bit of the blue and a little bit of the black, and I used that sort of as a line art color, and I just painted around my objects just to get a little bit of a sharpness in. You could also add a different medium at this point if you wanted to. You could add a pen or a colored pencil, or a lot of people use these for mixed media, so you could use anything that could add more details and sharpness if that's what you want. I was with this one challenging myself to only use these and the brush and some water, but no other medium. And I wanted to see how far I could go with just using these. And this took me quite a while, but I am pretty happy with the result. I'm pretty proud that I only used these, but feel free to do this however you want. Feel free to refine your piece with some colored pencils if you want to. I'm actually going to do that with the next idea that I'm going to show you. So we're now working on the right side of this page spread, and I wanted to kind of keep the theme with the landscape here because I wanted the left and the right page to sort of go together, and I wanted to also use a lot of the green and some of the purple so it would look nice next to each other basically. But to mix it up a little bit, this time I decided to do more of a nighttime scene, and I also challenged myself to do a few more details here. So I drew this castle that has a lot more details than the piece on the left, but not an extreme amount of details. So yeah, that's what I did. And I did a sketch and then I lightened it up with a kneaded eraser. And here I am now again just coloring all of that in, and then I will go ahead and blend that out with water. But I really tried to cover all of the surface as quickly as possible. And I used the lighter green tone again, and then I used the darker one. And then for the more shadowy parts, all of these things are gonna be leaves, by the way. I used the blue tone, and for the leaves on the top section, I used yellow, a little bit orange tones, or brown tones, I think I added here, just so we have a little bit, I used this sort of ochre color, just so we have a little bit of variation and not all of the leaves are the exact same colors. I wanted the ones that are coming from the trees to be warmer and the ones at the bottom to be a little bit cooler. And then I also did the background. I used the purple and I also added in some black to really darken it up. And now you can sort of see the magic happen as I'm blending all of that in. I think that always looks so satisfying, and you almost can't believe that all of this rough pigment on the page turns into this very rich color. This is so fun, honestly. And I also did all of those leaves, making sure that in between them I cleaned my brush so it wouldn't get too muddy and mixed up. And I also did leaves that aren't completely touching each other and then let those dry in between so it wouldn't turn too muddy overall. And also added colors to the castle and did some gradients here as well. The castle has this pinkish roof, and then all of the windows I did in this warm tone that's a mix of the yellow and the orange. And I also did some more greenery that's warm tones at the bottom. You really can see that much more clearly as soon as I'm blending it with my brush. It's kind of rough and hard to see when I'm first coloring it in. So these pieces, really, you have to trust the process with them because they're gonna look rough and messy for the most part. But that's kind of why I went in again and again to blend and color and blend. So it's not extremely rough until the end. And I also can tell what colors I'm working with, because sometimes when you blend them in with the water, they don't look as you would expect. For example, the purple could be much darker and much more pigmented as you would have thought. Or for the leaves here at the top, for example, they turned out a lot more warm and a lot more yellow than I thought. So if you really want to be sure about these things, I recommend testing it on a separate piece of paper first. But honestly, for me, it's kind of the part of the fun that I don't completely know how the colors will turn out in the end. And I just play with that, honestly, and I just accept whatever happens and then go from there and build up my colors. And I am pretty happy with how this one turned out. And yeah, I'm doing the same thing here as well, coloring, blending, adding water, all of those things. So now I am introducing some colored pencils, and with these I am adding more detail. I found that this piece could really do with a little bit more detail. I still wanted to keep sort of the integrity of the crayons and have the texture of them visible and not blend them in too much. I even added more texture afterwards, just so it makes sense that I used them basically. But I did make the piece a little bit more sharp, so to say, with the colored pencils. I used this sort of turquoise teal color for the leaves at the top, and I used a more warmer green tone for the leaves at the bottom. So that kind of mixed the colors together in a way, because since I used a cooler tone for the top leaves, they now look a little bit greener and not as yellow anymore. And the bottom ones look slightly warmer because I used a slightly warmer green tone for this. You could also use the exact same color for everything if you wanted to. So these were my three colors: the blue turquoisey tone, the green one, and then a purple tone. And this is how the first finished page spread turned out. And now I'm going to move on to this page. I already did this one here in the past. This was also done with these crayons actually. I just did that off camera, plein air, and it's been a while. I think that was maybe 2 years ago or something. And now I'm finally doing the page on the left here. And initially I wanted to do gouache on here because it's opaque, but I found that it would probably be cool if I did the same crayons on the left side here as well. And I think you can already tell what I am doing here. I am drawing a chameleon here, and I thought that this would be probably one of the easier animals to do with the crayons, and I think I was right. I had a good time with this chameleon, and personally I think you can stylize chameleons a lot and you would still know what it is, because they have this tail and all of those textures and also the eyes that are very representative of them. So it is a pretty good pick for something like that, where you don't want to go super detailed and just play around with textures. And for the background here, again, I mixed my colors. I even mixed in a little bit of that ochre brown tone just to desaturate the color a little bit and not have a super vibrant color in the background. And again, we can see the magic happen here with all of the blending and the color just really popping. There's so much pigment, honestly. And we still have some of the texture in the background visible. And so I think in the end, it almost looks like we never blended it with the watercolors at all, or didn't do much of that. That was the goal for me, at least. I didn't want the white of the paper to be visible anymore, but still I didn't want it to look like watercolors. I wanted it to look like a crayon. And I think I achieved that. Maybe it looks a little bit watercolory, but not too much. And I, played around with the colors again. It's also very green. I'm just noticing that this video has a very, very green theme. I hope you like green. Otherwise, I suggest doing the same things with other colors. I've seen a lot of people recreate my art with completely different colors, and it's always so fun to see, because then you were putting your own spin on it. And sometimes I get tagged on Instagram. My Instagram is at Visual Mind Art, by the way. And then I see the pieces that are inspired by mine, but they have completely different colors, and I think it's so fun to see. And so if you don't like green, then I recommend doing it in different colors. Especially a chameleon can have any color. The background could also be blue for the sky, or it could be a brown tone, or literally anything. It doesn't matter. It's an art piece. It doesn't have to be realistic. And I've done a lot of landscapes in colors that they wouldn't be naturally. I've done a lot of plants in pink or purple tones. So yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this rant, but you can basically see the chameleon appear more and more, and it's very yellowish. And it wasn't really what I had planned, that it would be so yellow. In the beginning, I wanted to add more green to the chameleon, but it sort of grew on me. I started to kind of like this yellowish green tone, and I kept it and just added more details to it and more colors to it, basically. And I think it's super satisfying to see all of the white of the paper disappearing and everything blending together as well. And with this piece too, I challenged myself to only use the crayons, and here I really wanted it to look like crayons with this one. With the first one, I did the line art in sort of a watercolor style. With the second one, I used the colored pencils for some additional sharpness. But here I really wanted to have this crayon look and really see how far I could go with that and have all of the outlines, all of the details, everything just with these, and sort of make this part of the style of the piece. And I mean, it isn't as sharp or detailed as the other pieces, but I really enjoyed the process of it, and I think it turned out really cute. And I also did, you can see here with the leaves, I did the line art on the edge where the lighter and the darker tone meets, and that way we're sort of hiding this watercolory look that the blending left. So it looks not as sharp. It looks a little bit more like a crayon. It has these frizzled edges. I did that with the chameleon as well. I did an outline with the purple, and I also did something with the white crayon, so we wouldn't be able to see those sharp, crispy edges anymore. And that way it looks a lot more like it was done only with crayons, which it was, but more like non-water soluble crayons and not kind of have this watercolory effect. I hope what I'm saying makes sense. But yeah, here you can see it. It frays a little bit on the edges, and it looks a lot more, I don't know, not blurry, but just textured. It doesn't look as... It looks a lot more playful, let's say it like that. And then I added some pink here to the mix because chameleons can have all kinds of colors, and I really wanted to play with that. And I'm pretty happy with that decision because it added a playfulness and a different color. And I also used the white crayon here to kind of blend that pink in. Of course, it's gonna change the color. It makes it a much lighter pink tone now. It mixes in with that. But I find that going over sections with white also blends them in a little bit. And I'm sure there's multiple ways on how to blend crayons. There's probably a lot of different tools that you could use, even if it's not water-soluble crayons. I've seen people heat them up. I've seen people use different kinds of solutions that you would usually use for oil paints or paint thinners, or I don't know. I've seen a lot of weird things happen with crayons, but here I'm just using the water-soluble ones with a little bit of water and then as crayons as they're kind of intended with all of the texture. And I had a lot of fun with all of these pieces. I hope that you also enjoyed all of them. Here is the finished page spread, and if you want to see more sketchbook ideas, then check out this video next.